Members, good morning. We have a quorum and it is the appointed time. I call to order today's meeting. On the agenda today, there are two papers for discussion. Prior to the meeting, the administration has submitted ECI 2024-58, an information paper for members' circulation. It sets out a summary of the latest changes in directorate establishment approved since 2002, and also the changes to the directorate establishment in relation to the two discussion items today. I remind members, if you have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest concerning the items today, please disclose the nature of such interest before you speak in accordance with Rules of Procedure, Rule 83A. I also bring to your attention Rule 84 of the Rules of Procedures concerning voting on matters in which you have direct pecuniary interest in. Item 1 today, that's paper EC 2024-5, number 5. The Housing Bureau's proposal, proposed creation of one time-limited supernumerary post of Administrative Officer Staff Grade C, D2, in the Housing Bureau from the 1st of April 2025 or with immediate effect upon approval of the Finance Committee, whichever is the later, up to the 31st of March 2028 to lead the operation of the dedicated team on subdivided units to implement the proposed regulatory regime on basic housing units or BHUs. The government has consulted the panel on housing concerning the proposal on the 2nd of December this year. In attendance of today's item are Ms. Winnie Ho, Secretary for Housing, Ms. Winnie Wong, Deputy Secretary for Housing, Mr. Jason Chan, Principal Assistant Secretary for Housing. I will now first invite Mr. Stanley Ng, the Chairman of the panel on housing, to report the salient points of the panel's discussion. Thank you, Chairman. The panel on housing, at its meeting on the 2nd of December, has discussed the administration proposal to create a Directorate Grade C supernumerary time-limited position in the Housing Bureau to lead the operation of the implementation of the BHU's regulatory regime. The proposed position will expire on the 31st of March 2028, so 3 years. Members supported the submission of this proposal for the ESC's scrutiny. At the same time, members pointed out that the enforcement work of the BHU's regulatory regime involved various bureaus and departments. The administration was urged to ensure that the position holder could enhance the coordination between the Housing Bureau and other government departments. Besides providing support on monitoring the support provided to SDU households, the position holder should also lead the implementation of the registration system and also explain the procedure to existing SDU landlords. Also, members suggested that the government conduct a comprehensive study on how to enhance resources to provide support for SDU households at a district level. Also, there should be sufficient manpower for implementing the regulatory regime and enforce the law. The administration has responded to our questions and answers. Thank you, Mr. Stanley Ng. 14 members have pressed the button. I will keep the time strictly. I will give each member 4 minutes. We have 2 items today. So these are the members: Mr. Shanghai Long, Lee Zhenkang, Tik Chi Yun, Stephen Ho, Charles Yu Chung, Chong Li Jie, Professor Chen Wing Kwong, Ms. Carmen Khan, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok, Dennis Leung, Ms. Dari Lee, Mr. Brave Chan, Ms. Julie Chan, and Ms. Lilian Kwok. Shanghai Long, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I speak in support of the creation of this time-limited supernumerary position at a Directorate Grade C. Starting from this term of the government, there have been a lot of new ideas on housing policy. For example, the slogan of bidding farewell to SDUs and also changing SDUs to BHUs. That's why we need a new dedicated director to lead the team. That is reasonable. Now, this is a 3-year time-limited position. So on the 31st of March 2028, does it mean that that will be the day when we can bid farewell to subdivided units? Does it mean that we have enhanced the housing ladder from public housing unit, transitional housing, light public housing, subsidized sales flags, and so on? Is the Secretary confident that after 3 years' time the work will be completed so that no retention proposal will be made? Secretary, I thank Mr. Shang Hailong for appreciating the workload of the Housing Bureau. Now, if you look at the timetable of implementing the BHU's regime, we will strive to get the support of the electoral to pass the law. Now, the registration period will be 12 to 18 months, depending on the views collected in the consultation. And then we will provide a grace period. That is also between 12 months to 24 months. So by simple math, 1 year for registration and 2 years of grace period, then that will take us to the end of 2028. The creation of this time-limited post up to the 31st of March 2028, it may be that by then the grace period is still not expired. But we are being very conservative. We are pitching the position as a 3-year term, and we will assess the workload then. Now, Ms. Winnie Wong is responsible for light public housing and transitional housing. By 2027, all light public housing will be built and population intake will be completed. By then, we will review our manpower position. I thank Mr. Shang Hailong for appreciating our heavy workload. We will balance our workload carefully against the resources at hand. No follow-up questions. Next, Mr. Michael Lee. Thank you, Chairman. At the meeting of the panel on housing, members gave their support to the BHU's regime. The goal is to provide adequate housing for everyone in Hong Kong. Now, BHUs have the minimum standard, like a minimum size of 8 meters square, and ventilation, and also fire escape, and so on. Professionals have to be engaged to audit the standards, and also the housing department will have to verify the check. Now, for this position, after the registration process, will the Housing Bureau conduct gatekeeping work? For example, if there are any complaints, appeal, or other matters, will the position holder be able to be the gatekeeper for all these? Second, the previous member mentioned about the term of the position. Now, with the heavy fiscal deficit, I think departments are being conservative, but I don't think a single position holder can discharge all the work. We have BHUs everywhere in Hong Kong, including the outlying islands. So how can you ensure that there is sufficient manpower? Secretary, I thank Mr. Lee for appreciating the burden on our shoulders. Now, we have a registration period, a grace period, and the BHU regime involves both the landlords and the tenants. We have to balance all their needs. We pitched the position as Directorate Grade C. This is a directorate post, but the position holder will be underpinned by 8 non-directorate posts. Now, in 2024-5, 3 non-directorate positions were created. These are professionals handling technical work, For example, a senior building surveyor, a structural engineer, and one senior executive officer. These posts were created in last year. Now, in the next year, there will be 5 non-directorate posts opened, including one senior administrative officer leading a team of professionals, including senior building surveyor, and survey officer. The team will support the directorate staff to deal with technical issues. For example, whether a certain layout is in compliance with the law and is a window up to standard and so on. Any follow-up question? I know there is a professional team, but there is only one team leader. So in the future, I hope you can harness the power of AI like ChatGPT to let the landlords and tenants understand the requirements for being recognized as a BHU, harnessing the power of technology. Secretary, I think this is a very good suggestion. Some complaints or inquiries are repetitive, so with the help of AI, we can save a lot of manpower. Dr. Dick Chi-Yun. Thank you, Chairman. All along, I have been opposing the government's creation of directorate grade officer. The financial secretary said that the establishment would not be enlarged. However, there are lots of supernumerary positions. There is always renewal after renewal, and the post would be extended for a very long time. The social welfare sector has its resources cut, but the government is allocating more resources to create new posts. This is an unreasonable use of resources. Now we have a $100 billion large fiscal deficit. The media and the public are asking for the government to cut expenditure on the civil service. On the contrary, we are proposing to create $200,000 directorate grade positions today. Now, I applaud Ms. Winnie Ho's work on housing, but I sincerely ask the Secretary to take back this paper to show the government's determination to eliminate fiscal deficits. This is not your mistake, but by withdrawing this paper, it will show the public that you have a will to improve the deficit. I also have faith that you can employ AI and through redeployments of manpower to improve the manpower situation. Secretary, I thank Dr. Tick for appreciating our work. We have a heavy burden. However, to deliver results, we need a high-quality team. Besides BHUs, we are picking up speed and quality on building public housing units. We have a very busy team. Also, there are a lot of existing housing estates to maintain. There are 6,000 lifts operating daily, which need to be maintained. In addition, we have light public housing and transitional housing projects in progress. The manpower within the Housing Bureau has been spread thin. Our colleagues have been working overtime. In implementing the BHU regime, we need to be very prudent. 110,000 households living in SDUs will be involved. Some of these SDUs are of a higher quality, some of them not. All of them have to be audited and recognized. In the process, additional manpower is needed. We have been very restrained already. The work we are doing will require a longer period than 3 years, but we are just asking for a 3-year term. Towards the later stage of the BHU regime, there will be room for redeploying manpower. But we really need this Directorate Grade C officer to lead the team.
Well, Chairman, I thank the Secretary for sharing her insight into her work, but the problem is on welfare. Things are getting more and more complicated. We see long queues of elderly lining up for welfare handouts. We all need more nurses and other professionals. Right, Dr. Teck Chi-yuen, I think this fiscal issue is something that the whole community should be concerned with. But there are also livelihoods issues to address. So we need to focus on whether this is money well spent. We can follow up on this issue at other meetings. Mr. Stephen Ho. Well, I think Dr. Teck Chi-yuen's point is reasonable. We need value for money, and we need manpower to support a capable government. So we do hope that in the future you can cut spending on various areas. Like Mr. Lee said, that you should make better use of ChatGPT and other technologies, because apart from creating this post, you also need to create other non-direct posts at a cost of $8 million, as I have read in your paper. So you need to be able to improve services without increasing manpower. So I think you should level with the public that there is no increase in expenditure in this paper, because it's the creation of one post in place of another. Well, we have various projects, transitional housing, like public housing. The goal is to address housing issue and that this post can be done away with, but then you now have another regime, basic housing units, to provide people with adequate living conditions, and that means this could be a permanent post. There is always a need for this post. So can you tell us, 3 years down the road, will this post holder be able to address the issues? Will you be able to streamline the work involved so that instead of having an AOSGC post taking charge of this matter, you can delegate this task to the subordinates to have a run-of-the-mill operation? So I'd like to have your take on the streamlining the procedures and reducing manpower. Secretary. Yes, I thank Mr. Stephen Ho for pointing out that is actually a one-for-one situation. There's another post under the Housing Bureau which will lapse by April next year. It's about transitional housing, because by that time the transitional housing units will be built. And by that time, we can wrap up the work of that AOSGC post. But at the initial stage, we need the leadership of an AOSGC leader. And as pointed out, this task involves inter-departmental and cross-bureau efforts. So like Mr. Lee Chun-keung said, we need to make use of this period of time to rationalize the system so that more colleagues will be able to get their hands on the system. We also need to leverage on technologies like AI, and we need to step up public education. That means it's important that we have the support of our professionals, professional architects, engineers, and by the time everybody's on board we will consider the best manpower arrangement for basic housing unit. Right, the arrangement is to have 1 directorate post underpinned by 8 non-directorate posts. In the future, perhaps you can scale it back to 1 directorate post underpinned by 6 non-directorate post holders. Right, I agree with you. In the interest of time, after Mr. Chow Chiu-chung has spoken, I'm going to draw a line. Thank you, Chairman. In recent years, the Housing Bureau has rolled out a number of measures to tackle housing issues such as transitional housing, like public housing, as well as a basic housing unit regulatory regime to tackle subdivided units, not to mention various public housing redevelopment projects. So there is a lot on the plate of the Housing Bureau. As I understand, the Deputy Secretary will need to oversee a number of committees as well as the regulating the sale of first-hand residential units. So I fully support the creation of this time-limited supernumerary post. Now I'd like to follow up on questions already asked by other members. In the beginning of this year, the Housing Bureau created another post, and that's a Directorate D2 post for a period of 2 years to lead the task force on tackling the subdivided units. Members expressed concern as to whether work would be wrapped up by in time, and we were told with confidence that after introducing the systems to eradicate the subdivided units, this post will lapse in 2 years' time, and the administration would not come back for an extension. So the same question applies for this proposed post. Are you confident that there won't be a need to extend this post and that work will be completed in 3 years according to the job description provided? What happens as the next step is enforcement or planning for enforcement actions? So that means there will be follow-up work. Grace Spirit together with registration system will take us all the way to at least 2028, 2029. So Secretary, what is your take on this? How will you complete the subsequent task if the directorate posts and the 8 non-directorate posts will lapse by February 2028 or March 2028? First of all, I'd like to thank my colleagues, including Ms. Wong next to me, for working within a very tight time frame in addressing housing issues. Now, light public housing is different from basic housing units. We do have a very tight time frame. We are required to build 30,000 light public housing units by 2026, 2027. It is a form of temporary housing. We also have an excellent team for operating the light public housing and to address residents' needs. For basic housing units, as members have suggested, it's a long-term arrangement. There is a demand in society for basic housing units, and it takes time to register and recognize the basic housing units. So 3 years down the road, we will review the financial position and manpower needs. Perhaps instead of keeping a directorate post, we may need more professionals, and we'll keep all options open. This 3-year supernumerary post is the best option we have, considering maximizing the use of manpower resources. Mr. Tony Chang. I speak in support of the administration's proposal to introduce a regulatory regime on basic housing units. Well, this is a time-limited supernumerary post, but I do see a lot on the plate of this post holder. And I echo what Mr. Chow Siu-chung said. I question whether it is feasible to conclude his work in 3 years. And according to the secretary, she is being very conservative or prudent in utilizing resources. Now, this is a pragmatic approach. I appreciate that. This time-limited post will take effect from the 1st of April next year. There's also another post at D2, a D2 post in charge of transitional housing. By the time everything is on track, I suppose, or I reckon, as I've learned from the secretary, that this other post will lapse. So it's a one-to-one replacement. There is no additional expenditure. I'm going to support this proposal. I'm checking Annex on Enclosure 3, the organization charts of Housing Bureau. There are over 15 D2 post holders. Setting aside 3 D2s on the left-hand side of the charts in charge of transitional housing and light public housing. With increase in housing production, you need to beef up your establishment for the purpose of management, but meanwhile, you also agree that you should deploy technology. For directorate post, however, I think a timely review is necessary. Now, you have the established staffing ratio when it comes to directorate to non-directorate posts. Chairman, I think that perhaps we should look into the overall organization of the government. With wider adoption of advanced technologies, perhaps this staffing structure should change as well. But anyway, it's off topic. I'm suggesting that a review be conducted on the organization structure. Secretary, a brief response, perhaps? Yes. To answer Mr. Tony Chair's question, transitional housing is exactly one classic example. When everything gets on track by then, and when our partner NGOs become familiar with the operations, then there won't be a need to keep this post, and this post will be scrapped. Meanwhile, in the Housing Bureau or the Housing Department, our objective is to enhance quality, quantity, speed, and efficiency, and this requires cross-bureau support. A high-level steer by a senior official is required to take it forward. And anyway, I urge members to support the work of our Bureau. Professor Chairman Kwong, I acknowledge the government's efforts in tackling subdivided units. In relation to this proposed AOSGC post, I have 2 questions. First, according to the administration's paper, this post is time limited. It will lapse on the 31st of March 2028. And according to the administration's estimation, the relevant bill won't be passed until the end of 2025, and then registration for pre-existing SDUs will not commence until the 4th quarter of 2025. The registration period could be 12 or 18 months, and to be followed by a grace period of 12 to 24 months. In other words, the whole registration and recognition process won't be completed until 2027. and this will be followed by support for affected residents, enforcement actions. Meanwhile, this proposed post will lapse on the 31st of March 2028. Is the government confident in completing the work on regulatory regime on BHUs within 3 years, or will there be a need to retain this post 3 years down the road? Another point is this. Many SDU tenants are concerned that the cost will be transferred onto them. After converting SDUs into BHUs, the rent will go up quite substantially. So how will this proposed post provide support and assistance to affected tenants so that these tenants will not become homeless?
Actually, the first question has been answered. The second question is more important. Yes, about the time frame. Other members have asked the same question before. Now, we are still consulting the public about the registration period and the grace period's duration. It's very probably that we will only enforce the law after 2027 or 8. Now, we have a very tight manpower position. We are doing a very careful balancing act, and we are just applying for a 3-year term for this new post. So I hope members would support our proposal. About the rent level and also the additional cost on the landlord. First of all, rent, it is a supply and demand situation. Now, there are 110,000 SDUs. Based on our current standard of 8 meters square, there are some 30% of these which are categorized as substandard SDUs. Now, for the remaining 70%, the landlord doesn't have to do an overhaul to make them up to standard. So the cost would be minimal. Now, for the remaining 30%, many of them are in old buildings. One flat is subdivided into 10 units. So, of course, the landlord has to invest to renovate them. Now, for the 70,000 for the remaining 30,000 housing units, let's say 10 to 15,000 of which can be turned into BHUs. Now, for those who are not eligible for public rental housing, there are some 40,000 people. So there will be 70,000 BHUs for some 40,000 tenants. So I don't expect a significant increase in rent. Now, for support, we have care teams and social worker teams within the Housing Bureau to provide support to tenants. Now, when the regime is rolled out, we will strengthen the establishment of that support team. Ms. Carmen Kan. Thank you, Chairman. I support the proposal. At the panel on housing, we learned that the administration strategy is to implement the regulatory regime, the registration regime, and the recognition regime simultaneously. And the grace period will be some 12 to 24 months. So as other members said, so 42 months in total. Some other members said that the 3-year term is not sufficient for discharging the tasks. So I think this post is really necessary because we are consulting the public and we are conducting a legislative exercise and we need a lot of coordination. Now, in terms of the recognition and registration system, we need to help the public to comply with the system rather than enforcing the law if they fail to meet the requirements. So will the post holder be able to absorb experience during the 3-year term? Now, about the alternatives, the paper mentioned that the Principal Assistant Secretary for Housing the position will expire soon. So on the 31st of March 2025. So are you not going to apply for a retention of the position? Now the acting director of housing is now being taken up by the three colleague. So do you have a clear division of work within your bureau so that Ms. Winnie Wong can have an easier job? Secretary. Now the post for implementing the transitional housing project will not be extended. And concerning the information dissemination to the landlords and tenants, now the team will formulate templates and pamphlets to tell the public the requirements of the BHUs. Now the new post holder will make sure that the work is smooth in this regard. Now concerning the promotion, we are glad that in November and December, 2 colleagues were promoted, one to the secretary and one to the director. Now this is great. We are working as a team. At present, other colleagues are taking up their position temporarily. Actually, directorate or non-directorate colleagues alike are both familiar with their own work in housing. What about the time frame? When will the director be, where will a permanent director be appointed? Now the CSB is very eager to formulate a permanent plan for our establishment. So I will trust Ms. Young in this. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. As Secretary, we always say that we need to spend within our means in our daily life. The same applies to the government. We have a fiscal deficit, and many people are worried. Of course, some suggestions are not practical. Now, because of fiscal deficits, some are saying that we need to slow down the building of infrastructure. So should we do the same for public housing units as well? What about hospitals? We can't afford to slow down in these facilities necessary for people's daily life. On creating revenue stream, we can't rely on tax hike. We need to make the cake bigger and increase government revenue. So we often hear weird things in the council, so I would just laugh it off. Now this post is really necessary. We shouldn't accuse the government of proposing the creation of this post, but rather why the government didn't act sooner and address the SDU's problem sooner. That's what we should accuse the government of, not the creation of this post. If you look at the work of this post, it is really complicated. First, there is the legislative exercise, and also there are a lot of issues like fire safety, ventilation, and size and drainage. Now, I raise this question. Some SDU tenants think that it would be very nice to have a window even if it faced the ventilation shaft. Well, if people have means, they would choose to live well. So this is a problem of why not eat cake. We have to make sure that we won't displace those people who are not eligible for public housing units and can't afford renting a proper housing unit. So this post holder will be responsible for registration, recognition of BHUs, and enforcement. So as some other members said, the term should be longer than 3 years. However, the Secretary would like to subject the Housing Bureau to the scrutiny of the ESC and the electrical. I am not against this either. Chairman, in relation to creation of post, depending on whether this is a permanent position or a time-limited supernumerary position, it depends on how well the Bureau is performing. Now, I really think that the Housing Bureau is very determined to address the housing issue in Hong Kong, and I believe that we should give them the benefits of doubt. Secretary, as mentioned by Dr. Low, the emergence of substandard SDUs is because of the reduction in supply of public housing units due to lack of land. Now, this term of the government has been identifying land rapidly and increase the supply of traditional public housing units. We need a large team to keep the work going. We can't stop. The smooth delivery of these projects are also important for our economy. So thank you for appreciating our heavy workload and the need for us to have a stronger establishment. Now about the ventilation shaft or the light well. Since the idea of BHUs was announced, there were a lot of questions about light well. So there are actually many types of light wells. We will be flexible. Mr. Dennis Leung. Chairman, we have a shortage of housing in Hong Kong. In terms of building LPH and transitional housing, this term of the government has been working very hard to shorten the PRH waiting time to 4.5 years. To address the substandard SDUs problem, the BHU was proposed, and I support the idea. Many members were concerned about the issue of fiscal deficit, but I have faith in the government's ability to turn things around. To address the housing issue, I think the government needs financial and manpower resources to take forward the BHU regime. So I support the creation of this time-limited supernumerary position. Now, in terms of the task, there are only 4 points mentioned on the paper. However, after the regime is implemented, there will still be work left for the Principal Assistant Secretary for Housing special duties too. Now, the post holder should work with the real estate agents authority to sort out the issue. So maybe this should be added to the terms of reference of the post holder. Now, the Housing Department is under the Housing Bureau. However, in relation to building structure and safety of buildings, the portfolio is scattered across departments under the Development Bureau. Even water leakage, it would involve the FEHD as well. Now, the post holder of the Principal Assistant Secretary for Housing, will they meet regularly with other departments to exchange views with them? Now, in terms of enhancing quantity, and in delivering the projects, I don't think the government should rely on internal memos. Department heads and the principal officials should sit down and meet together to make sure that the projects are delivered smoothly and effectively. This will convince us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Leung. I thank Mr. Leung for his insight, including liaison with the EAA. EAA is our partner. In fact, I've been talking to the chair of the EAA to implore their support. Well, they are familiar with the real estate agents, and they are, of course, familiar with subdivided units as well. Cross-bureau efforts in addressing problems. We have a result-oriented government. This is also how I work. Whenever there is a problem, we put our heads together, and then after the meeting, we put down the deliberations on paper as quickly as possible. We don't just talk about problems on paper, and we'll continue to adopt this approach. Next, Ms. Starry Lee. Chairman, I support the government's efforts in eradicating subdivided units as quickly as possible. I think this is unanimous in this council. I appreciate the need to create this post. But I'm concerned. Apart from post creation, you need to give this post holder more support to see the work done. Because after announcement in the policy address, there have been a lot of discussions about basic housing units. It involves a lot of stakeholders, including subdivided unit tenants, the landlords. There are also issues relating to enforcement after introducing the regime and other matters. So I see this is there is an org chart here. This post will be underpinned by other professionals like surveyors. What about other necessary resources in the community? I'd like the Secretary to elaborate on this as well, because subdivided unit tenants are not familiar with government policies. So you need staff to publicize your policy and provide counseling to those affected. My next point is this. You have a D2 post for transitional housing and light public housing. Is there room to combine all these work portfolios? And how do these post holders work with each other? Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Lee, for the questions. I fully agree that there are many stakeholders involved in basic housing units, and indeed we need to articulate the policies well. This directorate post holder will lead a team of professionals as well as administrative officers, senior administrative officers, and executive officers. And on top of that, we also have social worker teams. They will provide a lot of support, and that means resources will be deployed for the teams to reach out to the affected tenants and explain our policy to them. The other question is about the different work portfolios of transitional housing, like public housing, and BAHU. Well, at the moment, we have a principal assistant secretary in charge of light public housing. And after things get on track, this post holder will also oversee transitional housing as well. So there will be two principal assistant secretaries taking up special duties. One is about this proposed post, basic housing units, and the other it's for light public housing and transitional housing. Now, I have two suggestions. We do need the support of community organizations or at least other government departments. You should consider deploying resources to suitable community organizations to help explain your policy to subdivided unit tenants and other stakeholders, because after all, this is a task. This is an arduous task. You need to go through different steps, registration, recognition, etc. So make better use of NGOs, right? I fully agree with you. We'll go back and study that. Next, Mr. Chan Yong. Thank you, Chairman. I declare that I am involved with an NGO which is involved in subdivided units and the relevant work. I just want to commend the work of this bureau chief. You're very competent, and I support having more manpower for you. Now, the permanent secretary has been doing a very good job, and as a result, she's been promoted to be secretary. But meanwhile, we need to keep in mind that we have $100 billion deficit on the table. So my suggestion is this. Government departments should work together towards reducing the deficit. Every government department should chip in to reduce the deficit without compromising efficiency. Now, there is a criticism of creating time-limited directorate posts in place of lower-rank officials. But there are other options available, such as adjusting the duration of certain posts, shorten the duration so as to cut spending. This can help enhancing stability of the civil service. My other point is this. In the beginning of the year, another D2 post was tasked to take over this portfolio as well. And as a result, the portfolio became very heavy. And now, I think you need to explain to everybody that this post to be created will help share the workload. And you should give us a table of the work portfolios of different post holders, and that some of the work can be shared, they can be exchanged. Right, 2 points. Any response? Very briefly, I thank Mr. Chan for his comments. As an established practice, government officials always strive to take up as much as they can. Like Ms. Wong next to me, she's in charge of a lot of things, including transitional housing, like public housing, as well as basic housing units, etc. Well, there is a need to create a time-limited supernumerary post on this occasion. In our department, we have non-directorate posts. They come from the professional grade. We also have AOs, EOs, and if need be, we'll strive for more manpower resources to create posts at different ranks without compromising fiscal balance. Mr. Chan, make sure you air this view during the budget consultation. Ms. Judy Chan, thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to show my appreciation for the work of the Housing Bureau. They deserve our recognition. People need a roof over their head is just one of the necessities. So from transitional housing, light public housing, to the basic housing units regime, we see a spate of deep-seated problems arising from housing, and I support this proposed post in order to tackle these issues. Now, here are my points. 1D6 and 1D8 official from the Housing Bureau have been promoted, and I am delighted. Now, turning to paragraph 24 of the paper, as for the number of civil service posts, establishment C below MPS point 33, I see there is a drop in the number of posts. Even if there are increases for the other two categories, they are very moderate. So will you be concerned about not being able to scout sufficient talent? My other point is this. After the government has announced the basic housing unit regime, some unscrupulous subdivided unit landlords have begun to evict tenants or increase rent. According to the paper, this post holder will work for 3 years, but I'm concerned as to exactly when this post holder will actually start work, because people are suffering. Those living in subdivided units are in dire straits already. So I want to know if this post holder will hit the ground running. Right, we are having problems that needs addressing immediately. Secretary. The Housing Bureau has a heavy portfolio, but it's meaningful work. Our colleagues have a sense of mission to address long-standing issues. For example, for substandard subdivided units, we rely on expeditious housing production such as transitional housing and light public housing to lift people out of their plight as quickly as possible. Now, there are also other problems: high rent, poor living conditions for subdivided units. Then these tenants should apply for transitional housing and light public housing as quickly as possible. Earlier, I met a family of 4 at the application center. They're paying rent of $10,000 a month. Now, they've been assigned a transitional housing unit in Yuen Long. It's a 330 square foot unit, and the rent is just $1,630 a month. This family lived in a community without support. Now they have moved to this transitional housing unit operated by Tonghua Group of Hospitals. It comes with very good social support. They even helped the child get a school place. Now, for unscrupulous landlords evicting subdivided unit tenants, then please be reassured that there is a hotline run by the Ratings and Valuation Department. We have a hotline to take complaints, and we also have social work teams to provide support and answer inquiries. In fact, 470 landlords of subdivided units have been prosecuted, so their rights as tenants are guaranteed. Ms. Lilian Kwok. We have a perpetual housing shortage in Hong Kong, but I think that things are not getting better. When I was young, I lived in a squatter house, and the last squatter house cluster was demolished in 2001 in Sai Kung. Now we bid farewell to temporary housing back then, and the system became transit housing or interim housing, and now the interim housing estates are demolished. It seems that they have done the bid. Now you have various housing initiatives transitional housing, public housing, like public housing, transit centers, interim housing, etc. There may be overlapping among them. So will you consolidate all these policies? That is, will it be possible that through consolidation you can streamline your work? Now, I definitely support the creation of this post, but I need a timetable. As we eradicate subdivided units by introducing the regulatory regime, I think ideally you should bid farewell to other forms of transitional housing as well. My next point is this. What's the qualifications requirement for the post holder? Because this post holder is supposed to have expertise or professional knowledge on legal matters, fire services, engineering, etc. My other point is this. Some subdivided unit landlords may not be willing to renovate or alter their units, and the tenants living in substandard SDUs will need to find shelter somewhere else. So, Secretary, will you consider giving priority to these tenants in transitional housing allocation so that these SDU tenants won't have to live like nomads?
Secretary, I will first answer several questions, and then I will defer to Ms. Winnie Wong to talk about the candidates. Now, transitional housing and light public housing. The temporary housing mentioned by Ms. Lillian Kwok is very different. Those were just a structure with a rooftop. That's it. Now, in a light public housing, every household would have their own kitchen and toilets, and also they are supported by a quality social worker team. Those people who were ignored and neglected would be supported by a comprehensive network when they have moved into the transitional housing unit. And they would receive support all the way forward. Now, about our public housing estate policy, like Ms. Lillian Kwok said, we attach much importance to the turnover rate of public housing units. First, we will crack down on abuse of public housing units and free up resources for those in need. We are also reviewing the well-off tenants policies to provide more upward mobility to tenants. Also, we have the Green Farm subsidized housing, subsidized sales flag scheme to promote upward mobility as well. About transitional housing, when we consider applicants, we would give priority to those already living in a substandard environment for a long time. They would be given priority. The same principle would apply when we deal with SDU tenants. Now, on the issue of candidate caliber, Ms. Lillian Kwok is right. The depth and width of the scope of work is huge. So besides the professional quality of the post holder, they would need to work with a team of other government officials in the DOJ. They need to prepare for the implementation of the registration and recognition system. So we think that a Directorate Grade C staff would be appropriate. Now, subject to the approval by the LegCo, we will make internal redeployments to shift the workloads. Dr. Charman Kwok, the issue of subdivided units is pressing. I support the proposal to create this post because it is very difficult to get things started. Now, we are worried that some landlords would make the BHU as an excuse to kick out the tenants. Does the government have a team to address this problem? Now, the registration system will be implemented for BHUs. Now, we need to understand what kind of public housing units are the tenants of SDUs queuing for. For example, public housing units managed by the housing authority or the housing society, or are they queuing for youth hostel? So there shouldn't be duplication of resources. You need to share the information within the government. Otherwise, there would be wastage. So I think this is an area which you can do better to avoid more waste in the future. Third, as other members mentioned, whenever there is a new project, a new position would be proposed. Now, we understand this, but can there be more integration in the future? Now, the projects we mentioned, for example, LPH and transitional housing, these are temporary projects. So after the projects are delivered, we need to do a rethink on integrating the resources. It's just like after a war, you need to consolidate your army and retreat. Secretary. Now, about the rights of tenants, as I've mentioned, the RVD is dealing with the tenancy issue of SDUs. Complaints can be brought up to the RVD. The RVD's work is progressing smoothly. The DOJ and the RVD have prosecuted some 470 landlords, and I know that more cases are pending to be heard in court. Now, cross-departmental sharing of information, this is a very good point. We have heard your point. We need to have a system where we can conduct an easy analysis on the information collected. Any follow-up? Now, a last point for the Secretary. For those who contravene the tenancy control ordinance, can the names be published online so that the tenants affected can complain? Now, 470 is not a bad number, but we want to give more protection to the underprivileged tenants. We have heard it. We fully support it because we didn't know before today's meeting that there are some 470 cases being handled. Yes, we will update the public via press release. Mr. Kenneth Leung. Thank you, Chairman. Considering the creation of this post, I think this is necessary, and I support it. I've met with the Secretary many times to discuss how we can address the housing issues of young people. We are greatly saddened by those living in substandard living environment. Now, about the time-limited supernumerary post, the post holder will report to a D3 grade official. As we've heard just now, the implementation of the BHU regime requires cross-departmental and cross-disciplinary coordination. So why will the post holder be reporting to a D3 grade official instead of a D4 grade official? A higher level steering mechanism will ensure smoother and more efficient communication. Now, one of the functions of this new post is to implement the recommendations made by the task force on addressing the task force on tackling the issue of subdivided units. Now, the report has been compiled and included in the policy address. What about future recommendations and study reports by the task force? Will they be implemented by the new post holder as well? Secretary. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Leung. Now, there is actually continuity of our approach. Ms. Winnie Wong is the D3 grade official you mentioned. Now, besides leading the Sales of First-Hand Residential Properties Authority, she is also responsible for transitional housing, light public housing, and tenancy control. Now, you can tell that all these are closely related. When SDU tenants come across any issues, social worker teams would help them and refer them to transitional housing. So we are pleased that Ms. Winnie Wong's burden will be shared by a new officer, but we are working very closely. I'm the Deputy Chairman of the task force on tackling the issue of subdivided units. When necessary, we will convene meetings and address the issue with cross-departmental efforts. Mr. Leung? Now, about the recommendations made by the task force in the future, will they be taken forward by the D2 grade official? Now, the work of the task force is to advise the chief executive in establishing the framework on BHU. Now, in terms of the subsequent works like registration, recognition, and enforcement, as well as the appeal system, as the Deputy Chairman of the task force, we will make sure that these are implemented. I think Mr. Leung's question is, for future recommendations made by the task force, will the work fall on the shoulders of the new D2 grade official? That is right. The new post holder, as well as Ms. Winnie Wong, will be taking forward the work of the task force. Mr. Edmund Wong. Thank you, Chairman. I understand why the government is proposing this new position, despite the fiscal deficit, because this is necessary. Now, the official will be underpinned by a senior building surveyor and a structural engineer. One has come into office already. One will be employed next year. Now, they will be responsible for monitoring and implementing the registration and recognition system. I wonder why the arrangement is so. Why can't we just hire one senior building surveyor underpinned by two structural engineer posts? That would save a lot of money. Why we need two senior building surveyors? Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Wong. Now, the senior building surveyor who came into office in the 2024-25, I would like to thank the post holder. We want to make sure that our policy is down to earth. Now, the colleague is seconded, the colleague came from the building department. The post holder is very familiar with the potential issues, for example, in building plans and so on. The building surveyor provided us with great insights and has been very beneficial in helping us implement the policies. Now, in the future, the workload will be even more heavy because there will be a lot of cases submitted to the authority for recognition. Now, among the 110,000 SDUs, for some 70,000 of them, not much work is needed. The landlords will submit their premises for recognition by our colleagues. So we need more professionals to help vet the applications.
A follow-up question, Chairman. I appreciate the Secretary's reply, but as other members have suggested, different types of cases are envisaged. So you should make use of big data and AI to help professionals. Now, while I appreciate this statement, I want to make sure that is it true that 70,000 out of the 110,000 units will be straightforward and they'll be subject to the professionals' approval. Well, for these professionals, they will be receiving cases prepared by professionals as well. So these professionals from outside are also familiar with the laws and regulations. And is it really necessary to have a big team of professionals in the civil service establishment to vet these cases? Well, I'll give the floor to Ms. Wong to give you more details. Now, Mr. Wong asked why we need 2 senior building surveyors. These are also time-limited posts. These 2 surveyors will help us build the system. Now, 1 post has been filled. This post holder will be assisting me and the D2 post holder to enact legislation as well as code of practice. The code of practice requires professional knowledge and liaison with professional groups. And this is why we need a senior building surveyor. We are going to put in place a registration system and a recognition system. This work requires a professional with sufficient seniority. Secretary refers to the work involved after introducing the regime, and this is exactly why we need the 2 professionals, Mr. Gary Chan. Now, I support the creation of the time-limited post. We need to address housing issue. We need somebody capable to take up this work, and also we need to make sure that it's value for money. You need to strike a fine balance between these matters, and it's no easy task. Now, you mentioned the other post holder who's in charge of light public housing and transitional housing. Now that things are wrapping up for these 2 initiatives, can you redeploy manpower from these portfolios to BHU? Because according to the time frame for these initiatives, we're going to have good dovetailing. So a team of colleagues can be redeployed from light public housing and transitional housing to basic housing units along with the directorate post. I think this will be a more acceptable proposal by the public. Secretary. Now, as Mr. Chan must know, we are working full steam at light public housing unit production. They will be completed by the beginning of next year. So that's for the first batch. We'll proceed to application and registration, and the remaining 30,000 units will be completed by 2026-27. And this is a rather hefty task to process all these applications. Now, for transitional housing, the post is a time-limited one for 2 years from 2024 to 2026 only. Is it possible to redeploy manpower and optimize existing resources. Well, at today's meeting, we've had some insights. For example, we will consider improving or streamlining the procedures by leveraging on technologies such as AI so as to reduce workload for our colleagues. Now, 2 more members have pressed the button, but we're running out of time, so I'm afraid they won't have a chance to speak. We now proceed to vote. For those in favor of EC 2024-25 bracket end of bracket 5, for those in favor, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hand. I see none. I believe the members who have voted, the majority of members who have voted are in favor of this proposal, so the proposal is carried. The next item put to vote is whether we recommend that this item be further discussed by the Finance Committee. According to 40A of the Establishment Subcommittee procedures, I put this to a vote that this subcommittee recommends further discussion of the proposal endorsed by this subcommittee in paper EC 2024-25 number 5 by the Finance Committee. I remind members that if this motion is passed, it means that the subcommittee will recommend further discussion of this paper by the FC, and if this is vetoed, it means that this subcommittee does not support further discussion. Those in favor, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. I think the majority of members who have voted in this motion are not in favor of this motion. So this motion is vetoed. This subcommittee will not recommend further discussion by the FC. The paper number EC 2024-25 number 5. Item 2, EC 2024-25 number 6, in relation to Civil Aviation Department. It is proposed that one time-limited supernumerary post of AOSGB D3 in the Civil Aviation Department be retained with effect from the 1st of April 2025 or with effect upon approval of the FC, whichever is later, up to the 31st of March 2027, to take forward various major initiatives, including the policy initiatives to enhance Hong Kong's status as an international aviation hub following the commissioning of the Third-Runway System, support the development of low-altitude economy in Hong Kong, as well as to enhance the overall governance of the Civil Aviation Department. The administration consulted the Economic Development Panel on this proposal on the 3rd of December 2024. To answer members' questions, we have Ms. Joanne Hong, Deputy Secretary for Transport and Logistics, Ms. Clara Wong, Acting Director General of Civil Aviation, and Mr. Dominic Chow, Deputy Director General of Civil Aviation. As Mrs. Regina Ip is not here, on behalf of Chair of the Economic Development Panel, I will read out the report. At the meeting on the 3rd of December 2024, the Economic Development Panel discussed the proposed retention of the time-limited supernumerary AOSGB post in the Civil Service Department designated as Deputy Director General of Civil Aviation 2. Members supported putting forward the proposal to the Establishment Subcommittee for consideration. However, members were concerned that imposing a time-limited post might hinder imposing a time limit for the post might hinder the work of the post holder, which is crucial to promoting economic development in Hong Kong. Some members expressed concern whether there is sufficient manpower to support the department in fulfilling the important mission of enhancing Hong Kong's status as an international aviation hub and promoting the development of a low-altitude economy. The administration responded to members' concerns and questions at the panel meeting already. So, would you like to walk us through the paper? Ms. Wong? Ms. Hong? Thank you. Yes, we do. Good morning, Chair, members. The Civil Aviation proposed to retain a time-limited supernumerary post for 2 years until the 31st of March 2027. This time-limited supernumerary post is an AOSGB D3 post designated as Deputy Director General of Civil Aviation 2, with the commissioning of the third runway system and the government's intention to develop low-altitude economy in Hong Kong. We need to support work in various areas. The CAD will support the Transport and Logistics Bureau in expanding the aviation network and enhancing cooperation to enhance our status as an international aviation hub. The government also announced in the 2024 policy address to set up the working group on developing low-altitude economy in order to support the initiative. That means the CAD will play a key role in implementing the regulatory sandbox pilot projects. We also need to study legislation planning of low-altitude infrastructure. There is a need, therefore, to retain this time-limited supernumerary post so that in the coming 2 years there will be a step-up effort in high-level steering management to take forward the initiatives I mentioned. We also need to enhance the overall governance of the CAD, or administrative governance of CAD. We consulted the Economic Development Panel on the 3rd of December 2024. We've garnered their support. I urge members of this subcommittee to support this proposal. Thank you, Deputy Director General. There are 8 members in the queue: Shang Hailong, Chen Wing-kwong, Yong Hao-yen, Lo Wai-kwok, Chow Siu-chung, Tang Fei, So Chou-ming, and Benson Look. Each member will have 4 minutes. Oh, we just received the 9th request from Kingsley Wong. We start with Shang Hailong. Chairman, I speak in support of this proposal to retain the supernumerary post for 2 years. First of all, I want to know whether this supernumerary post was first created for a period of 2 or 3 years. And can you tell us what this directorate post holder has done? Can you give a summary of his work in the past 2 or 3 years? And as for the way forward, upon commissioning of the third runway system, how will this post holder help in consolidating our status as an international aviation hub? I'll give the floor to Mr. Chow, Deputy Director General. This post was first created in 2016. It was created for the purpose of enhancing internal governance of the Civil Aviation Department. It was extended in 2019 to 2025 to support the third runway system project, as well as the unmanned small unmanned aircraft. As for the way forward, the third runway system, the Civil Aviation Department will continue to support the Transport and Logistics Bureau in developing new flight routes upon commissioning of the third runway system. We'll work on the software, in other words. With enhanced capacity, we will be more proactive in consolidating Hong Kong's status as an international aviation hub. The Civil Aviation Department liaises with our mainland and overseas counterparts. We also maintain a good relationship with airline companies and other stakeholders in the aviation industry. So we play an active role in this regard. On developing new flight routes, we support the Transport and Logistics Bureau. According to the 2024 policy address, in 2025, we will collaborate with more than 10 partners, civil aviation partners, to roll out new services. Now, there are three major tasks for this post holder: legislation, promoting the third runway system, and implementing the sandbox projects, in enhancing overall governance in line with the commissioning of the third runway system.
Chairman, I have some follow-up questions. According to Mr. Dominic Chow, while his statements were mainly descriptive, I hope these can be turned into KPIs and a concrete roadmap so that we can understand the real work of this position. Now, with the retention of this post for another 2 years, what will the post holder achieve? Mr. Chow? Now, in terms of partners, we would like to explore more flight routes with 10 partners within 2025 about a low-altitude economy. Within this legislative session, we will introduce amendments bill to extend the small unmanned aircraft order to cover unmanned aircraft weighing over 25 kilograms. And also in the first half of next year, we will begin to study the systematic requirements for dealing with low-altitude activities. Now, please work with the legislators in setting up the KPIs. Professor Chen Wing-Kwong, thank you. According to the paper, the position was the post began in 2016. A retention of 2 years was applied for in 2019. Now the government is applying for another 2-year extension. Now, actually, many of the work are continuous. They can't be completed within 2 years' time, especially LAE or low altitude economy. Now, the government is applying for an extension period of 2 years. Why is that? Will you come back to ask for another 2-year retention? How can we ensure the continuity of the job? Now, some job descriptions are quite vague. For example, enhancing collaboration with the mainland and other partners, promoting innovation in aviation technology, and promoting professional exchanges, and promoting youth activities. Can you tell us the KPIs so that we know what the post will achieve? Deputy Secretary, first about Ms. Clara Wong. Now, I will first talk about the retention period of 2 years, and then we'll defer to my colleagues to talk about GBA youth exchange. Now, we agree that the bulk of the work of the Acting Director General of Civil Aviation is ongoing, especially when the third runway system is just commissioned. Now, together with the working group on promoting the development of low-altitude economy, chaired by the Deputy Chief Secretary for Administration, the post holder will work with the working group, as well as launching the regulatory sandbox. Now, we will review the work of the post in 2 years' time and consider redeploying our manpower. And then we will report to the Council and seek member support then. Mr. Dominic Chow. Thank you, Chairman. In terms of strengthening collaboration with the mainland and promoting the use of technology, by the end of 2023, we held for the first time the first Asian Pacific Capacity Building Conference. Now, there were also 2 international conferences held by the ICAO in Hong Kong in that year. Now, we have been encouraging civil aviation manufacturers to make use of Hong Kong as a platform to promote the aviation technologies to other Asian Pacific partners. We have been actively involved in this. We have the International Aviation Academy in Hong Kong involving in these activities as well. 8 institutions, including both Hong Kong and mainland organizations, signed a memorandum of understanding. The recommendations on which have been implemented progressively. Now, in this year, we are planning to host an international conference in late 2025. This is the first time the international conference is held in Hong Kong. Usually, the conference is held in European or Western countries. Now, this is the first time that the conference holds its activity in the Asia Pacific region. Now, the CAD is striving to have more of these international conferences held in Hong Kong. Now, for youth work, in collaboration with a youth uniform group, we have been promoting knowledge of aviation. That is the HKRSP. Together with a dozen of secondary schools, we have been promoting aviation knowledge. Sorry for interrupting you, Mr. Dominic Chow. You don't have to tell us what you have been doing. The question was whether there are any forward-looking plans. Now, I believe that Ms. Joanne Hung, the Transport and Logistics Bureau, will have to report to the panel on transport about the KPIs. For example, a certain number of international aviation events held in Hong Kong and the number of new flight routes introduced each year. We just want to learn about your KPIs. Next, Ms. Eunice Yong. Thank you, Chairman. I support retaining this directorate grade 3 staff. This is a 2-year time-limited post implementing continuous work, for example, developments of the LAE and the Third-Runway System. Now, the system was just commissioned on the 28th of November this year. I believe the work will not be completed in 2 years' time. It will be ongoing. So my concern is similar with other members. The post was created 6 years ago, and there have been 2 proposals for retention already. So should we make this position permanent? The concept of low-altitude economy, or LAE, is just at its conception stage. And also there are continuous developments in a collaboration with the international bodies. Also, there are continuous amendments to the law, for example, the Small Unmanned Aircraft Order. So in terms of application and privacy, there are concerns. We need to strike a balance on the use of SUA, and we also need to conduct education campaign as well. I believe that the CAD alone is not sufficient in discharging the work. So in terms of the development of SUA, I don't think the CAD should be the only responsibility holder in this. So in terms of the sandbox and testing of SUA, as the meeting of the panel on economic development, we have talked a lot about the developments of SUA. So we want to know what will happen after 2 years' time and what are the KPIs in the period. Deputy Secretary, thank you. Like Ms. Eunice Yong said, there will be a lot of changes to our work on developing the LAE. In the next 2 years, we will collect data and gather experience through the sandbox. Ms. Yong is right. The responsibility is not just on the CAD and the TLB. Now, the CAD is taking forward the regulatory sandbox while making plans for the long term. So the next 2 years will be the planning stage of our future work. After the 2-year period, we will conduct a review on the manpower position for developing LAE, and then we will report to the Council. Chairman, we are just doing testing and R&D for SUA. In the future, we will have to deal with enforcement and publicity and education. So I hope in terms of promoting the use of SUA, we need to know Hong Kong's positioning and how we can complement with the mainland. We are very interested in cross-boundary collaboration in terms of carriage of goods and passengers. When can we use SUAs to carry goods across the border, and when we can have passengers flying on SUAs? So the roadmap. Ms. Joanne Hung. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Yong. Now, the working group on developing LAE is inviting interested parties in participating in the sandbox. Now, we will seek members' views on the roadmap in due course. There are still 8 members waiting to speak. I will draw a line here. I have to reserve some time for the vote, so I will extend the meeting by 15 minutes. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. I declare interest. I'm a board member of the AA. I'm also the chairman of the Committee on the Third-Runway System and Construction Works. Now, this position was created in 2016. It was a 3-year. It had a 3-year term. It was retained in 2019 until now. So the extended work scope for this position is actually not completely new. When implementing the third runway system, we have already reviewed the regulatory approach on SUAs. However, the nature has changed since. Now, on the 28th of November, the third runway system has been fully commissioned, and we are still yet to fully utilize its capacity. Now, with the full commissioning of the system, the carrying capacity of the airports is significantly increased. It can now serve 120 million passengers and handle 12 million tons of goods. Now we are nowhere near that full capacity. So in terms of consolidating Hong Kong's position as an international aviation hub, there is much work to be done. Now, the nature of the third runway system's work is different now, but we need someone who is very familiar with the third runway system. And we need to regulate the activities of SUAs and develop the LAE, so that is a whole new level of work. So I agree with other members. These work can't be completed in 2 years' time. So I believe we would agree to a 3 or even 4-year term. So of course, I am fine with the government saying that they would like to be subject to the council's scrutiny by coming back in 2 years' time to report your work to us. So I support the proposal. A member asked about how the post holder will enhance collaboration with the mainland and overseas partners. Well, actually, this is not the sole responsibility of the post holder. AA will work with the CAD in the course. Also, there are international platforms for collaboration. It is also important to work with these international bodies. So I really think that this post comes with a heavy responsibility. So I would support extending the term of this post for 2 years. This is Dr. Lo's views. Any response? No, thank you.
Mr. Zhao Chuchong, Thank you, Chairman. Now, for the Deputy DG of Civil Aviation, according to the job description, there are a number of points, and I'm reading from the enclosure. One of them is to supervise the operations of Air Services, Safety Management Division, Administration Division, etc., and also to take up corporate governance and steer public relations management. One important point is about capacity. I think this is crucial to our status as an international aviation hub. So I support retaining this post for 2 years. But my question is, why 2 years? Why not 3 years or 5 years? What will happen 2 years down the road? What is your consideration? According to the paper, after completing the regulatory framework on low-altitude economy, things were different. Upon commissioning of the third runway system, is it that this post can be scrapped? Is it that one deputy DG will suffice to oversee the corporate governance of the CAD? I'm concerned about manpower of the CAD. Now, according to the establishment, it's 904, but only 772 posts are filled. That means that we have 132 vacancies. How many of the 132 vacancies belong to professional posts, especially air traffic controllers? I'd like to know more about the recruitment and wastage of air traffic control officer grade. Do you have sufficient manpower to cope with the third runway system, especially the increase in capacity after commissioning of the third runway system? And I'd like to know more about the team supporting the regulation of UAS, including recruitment and wastage. Let me take the first question about the division of work of the two deputy DG of Civil Aviation, and also I'll give the floor to my colleague to supplement the next question. Now, we have a very clear delineation of portfolios between the two deputy DGs. With enhanced capacity upon commissioning of the third runway system, this Deputy Director General will have more on their plate, especially with more air movements and flight routes. In the coming years, the workload for this Deputy DG will continue to increase. As I said, for this post holder, it will support the Transport and Logistics Bureau in expanding aviation networks through negotiating with partners and lobbying airline companies to operate more flight routes as well as low-altitude economy. In the coming 2 years, there will be a lot of changes, and it's a period for us to put in place plans for the future, and that requires the support of the Deputy DG. Mr. Chow will supplement. Yes. For our professional grade staff, including the air traffic control officer grade, post-pandemic, the competition for talent has been keener than before, and that accounts for increased wastage within our department. We'll continue to roll out and recruitment exercises to attract young people to join us. We'll also lengthen the recruitment period so as to replenish manpower as soon as possible. For the small unmanned aircrafts, there'll be a slight expansion in our team to support users, so there is a moderate increase in the establishment. Mr. Tang Fei. I support this proposal for the purpose of supporting low-altitude the economy as well as consolidating our status as an international aviation hub. This post will be crucial. According to paragraph 12, it is said that it is necessary for the post holder to have strong political acumen and broad administrative competencies to drive development of low-altitude economy in Hong Kong. Can you elaborate on this? What is meant by strong political acumen? Because one of the tasks for this post holder is to consolidate our status as an international aviation hub, and that may entail international negotiations to expand our airspace rights. So, of course, it's necessary for this post holder to have strong political acumen. As for low-altitude economy in Hong Kong, is a local issue. I don't understand why you need political acumen. My other question is this. This post will be retained for another 2 years. I don't have strong views on that. I think it's all right if it's extended by 3 or 5 years. But according to paragraph 18, this Deputy DG will continue to be supported by 132 non-directorate civil service posts. I suppose these are permanent posts, not supernumerary ones. But that's against the logic. The Deputy DG overseeing the 132 non-directorate civil service posts, which are permanent posts, is a time-limited one. So why don't you turn this DG into a permanent post, since the post holder has a heavy portfolio anyway? Well, I understand at present you may face certain public pressure if you ask for a permanent post, but it's crucial to have this post for the medium to long-term development of our economy. So why didn't you ask for a permanent post to be created? Yes. Thank you. I will first take the question on strong political acumen for the post holder in relation to development of low-altitude economy. Now, on this issue, we believe a high-ranking official is needed. For example, for cross-boundary low-altitude flying activities, we need liaison with the mainland counterparts. There is also a basket of issues relating to personal data privacy, customs clearance, and explaining to the public the benefits of low-altitude economy. And all these tasks require an experienced official. An experienced official's leadership. We also need to make reference to overseas experience and practices and standards. So that requires political acumen as well as global vision. Now, about the period of 2 years, we appreciate that this is a long-standing task. Work is to be shared among our team. So the time-limited post will be subject to review 2 years down the road, and if necessary, we'll come back to LegCo. Dr. So Xiaoming. My questions are similar to those already asked by Mr. Tang Fei. The post was first created in 2016 and it's been 8 years. Over the years, the Civil Aviation Department has been relying on time-limited posts to tackle major policy issues. Now, in short, my question is whether you create a permanent post instead. to enhance planning and efficiency and to ensure stability in the team. Right, that's a short one. Thank you, Chairman. I've heard members' suggestions that this post should be made permanent. I understand that there is support from members. We will conduct a review and come back to LegCo next time. Mr. Benson, look. Chairman, I support the proposed retention of the time-limited supernumerary post in the Civil Aviation Department. Upon commissioning of the Third-Runway System, we should be able to further enhance our status as an international aviation hub. This is also the mission given by the 14th Five-Year Plan. We support expanding our aviation network and operation of more international flight routes. This will help us dovetail with national strategies. In terms of the main duties and responsibilities for this post holder, I see a similar statement, and that is expansion of aviation network and enhancing connectivity following the commissioning of the Three-Runway System. So about negotiating airspace rights, other KPIs for this post holder. Some airline companies have told us that the Civil Aviation Department should engage them earlier in the negotiation process. These airliners will need to get ready as well. So that's the first point. Second point, proposed job description. I read here that this post holder will be responsible for overseeing the deployment of resources. Now, since COVID-19, we've seen a general shortage of manpower in terms of the professional grade or pilots. So what is your strategy in recruiting manpower? My third point is this. Now, like other members said, you have some standing tasks that require the support of a permanent post. Is it because, according to the budget, you need to maintain zero growth in the civil service establishment, and therefore you propose to retain this supernumerary post instead of applying for a permanent post? I need to declare that I have a relative working in the Civil Aviation Department. Yes, I'll take the first and the third questions, and Mr. Chow will take the second question. Now, thank you, Mr. Look, for the questions on expanding the aviation network. Recently, we've set up the liaison mechanism between the government and the airline companies. We want to actively involve them, in other words, for them to know more about our line of thinking and for them to give us support. So this coordination mechanism is important because these companies are more familiar with the global arena and they can provide the necessary technical support. So the Civil Aviation Department, the Airport Authority, and the airline companies are involved in this mechanism. We've updated the civil aviation agreement with more than 10 civil aviation partners to expand our network. Now, to answer the third question, whether it should be a time-limited or a permanent post, at the moment we're exercising prudence. We want to achieve results in the 2-year period. Now, on civil aviation agreements, we do have KPIs. We should sign at least 10 agreements. That means we should either update or start negotiation with at least 10 civil aviation partners.
Mr. Chow. Thank you. Mr. Look. On strengthening our effort to attract air control talents into our team. We have stepped up publicity on emerging social media platforms to help potential candidates understand the job more. Say, for example, in 2024, with our enhanced efforts, we have 40% more candidates applying for the job. We have met the recruitment target for our vacancies this year. We will continue with our work in the way forward. Next, Mr. Kingsley Wong. Thank you, Chairman. Now, I have the same question as other colleagues. The term of this post. Now, it is a very important job. They are responsible for developing the LAE and running the third runway. So we need to make this permanent. Now, there are 60% more time-limited positions compared with a few years ago. Now there are 94 compared with 59 before. Now, while considering our fiscal position, the government needs to apply for creation of permanent positions rather than time-limited positions when necessary. It would give rise to the perception of abuse of the time-limited position system. So there should be a cap of renewal. Otherwise, some posts would be extended without limit. So I think we need to have a maximum number of extension. Agreed, some posts have been extended for more than 2 decades. Ms. Joanne Hung, considering the approach on time-limited positions, that is up to the CSB for making an overall planning. Now we are taking a conceptual approach in applying for this job because of the work scope of the post. Ms. Elizabeth Court. Now I support the retention of the post, but like other members, I think the workload is very heavy. It is not appropriate to keep the post as a supernumerary post, and 2 years is too short. Now, with the new runway commissioned, the workload will be very heavy. And also, I'm worried about the manpower position. Do you have a sufficiently large establishment in discharging all the work? The regulatory sandbox for small unmanned aircrafts will receive a lot of applications. Are there sufficient staff to handle the applications? And will there be adequate support to help the applicants? Now we are running against the clock to develop the LAE, so we need to implement various application scenarios quickly. Now, the administration also supports cross-boundary helicopter transport. This is also a key component in the LAE. There should be co-location arrangements at the airport as well, so that for passengers coming via international flights, they can be transported to other GBA cities via heliports from our airport. They can reach their regional headquarters easily with cross-boundary helicopter transport. But it requires a lot of discussion with the mainland authority, which makes the workload of this post heavier. So will the post holder be underpinned by a sufficiently strong team to discharge the work? Mr. Chow, do you have enough people to help you? Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Kwok. We have a dedicated team in handling all the related work of SUAs. Now, we have enlarged the dedicated team to implementing SUAs. And also, we have adjusted the manpower position upwards appropriately for other teams. Now we are taking forward the study on the legislative approach and regulatory approach for SUAs. So in 2 years' time, if the workload cannot be met with internal redeployment of manpower, we will come up with a new proposal. On cross-boundary transport and passenger carrying SUAs, now we are reviewing the regulatory regime for small unmanned aircraft weighing over 25 kilograms under the SUA order so as to meet the need for developing LAE in Hong Kong. Next, Mr. Perry Yiu. Thank you, Chairman. I declare interest first. I am a board member of the Airports Authority. I support retaining the supernumerary position for 2 years' time. But I also agree with other members that the post is of critical importance. With the full commissioning of the Third-Runway System, this is exactly the time when we act progressively to seek strong development. So I support making the position permanent. I also have some questions. After the commissioning of the Third-Runway System, more slots will be opened at the airport. That involves a lot of work. Now we need to work more closely with our partners to make full use of the increased capacity by increasing destinations and flight routes and flight schedules to make better use of the Third-Runway System, especially during peak periods. So does the administration have a plan in mind to consult the industry on making better use of the slots? Another point, besides civil aviation, commercial aviation is also important. The usage of the slots of commercial flights runway is also important. Since it is our target to develop a mega event economy, there will be a lot of high net worth individuals flying to Hong Kong via private jets or private helicopters. And with the new runway commissioned, the airport should be able to provide a more flexible schedule of usage of slots to meet the needs of commercial flights or private jets so that we can be more attractive for high ultra net worth individuals. I think we welcome private jets coming. In the past, we didn't have the room. What about now? Mr. Chow? Thank you. Concerning small commercial aircrafts and helicopters and their cross-boundary use, the TLB and the CAD are working on plans to meet the new demands. We would like to provide regular services to these high-end customers because they will bring about high economic benefits to our city. We will work with the AA on how to enhance the relevant services. On making better use of the slots, we maintain a close working relationship with local and foreign airlines. Now we will make good use of these slots to consolidate our cargo capacity. Compared with the pre-pandemic level, we have recorded a 10% increase, especially for electronic products from the Western countries. Now we will enhance promotion to foreign airlines so as to make full use of the increased capacity. No follow-up questions. Now, the Hong Kong International Airport is a critical asset of Hong Kong. Our future economic development will heavily rely upon this project. So I think most members supported extending the supernumerary post for 2 years. So we will wait for your report in 2 years' time. Sorry, Ms. Carmen Khan, time is up. I will now put the paper to vote. Those in support of the proposal in paper EC 2024-5, number 6, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. None. I think most of the members in the vote supported the proposal. The proposal is approved. Now, the next vote is on whether the Finance Committee should conduct further discussion on the proposal. Now, in accordance with the rules of the ESC, paragraph 48, I now put to vote the following question: that this subcommittee recommends further discussion of the proposal set out in EC 2024-25, number 6, which was approved by this subcommittee by the Finance Committee. I remind members, if the question is approved, it means that we recommend further discussion of the paper by the Finance Committee. If it is negative, it means that the subcommittee does not recommend further discussion of the paper by the FC. Those for the question, please raise your hands. None. Those against the question, please raise your hands. Thank you. I think most of the members in the vote were against the question. The question is negative. This subcommittee does not recommend further discussion of the paper EC 2024-5, number 6 by the Finance Committee. That concludes today's meeting. Thank you very much.